I'm overjoyed to announce that Dr. Thomas Campbell, son of Dr. T. Colin Campbell and co-author of the China Study, has agreed to do an interview for Walker's Way Plant-Based Warrior. For those that don't know, the China Project is the most comprehensive study of health and nutrition ever conducted, and the book The China Study has sold over 1 million copies and helped to inspire the documentary Forks Over Knives. Dr. Campbell is such a great resource for Walker's Way, and he has a plant-based toddler of his own and another baby boy that just arrived with his wife, Dr. Erin Campbell. So, Dr. Campbell, thank you for taking
Sure.
time out of your busy life. It's such an honor
Yeah.
that you're donating your time to answer a few questions for Walker's Way.
Sure.
I'll be reading some questions because they come from Walker's Way followers. I myself am such an enormous fan of your work, and you've been such an inspiration. I've read your books, I've watched your documentaries, I've watched your YouTube videos. But for those that don't know about you and about Whole Foods plant-based, can you give us a basic summary as to why these foods are so good for us?
Sure. So people think there's a lot of confusion about nutrition, but there's actually a surprising amount of agreement. It turns out when you look at the sort of consensus statements over the past 30, 40 years, and generally the overwhelming body of evidence suggests we should be eating more unrefined plant-based foods and less animal foods and less processed foods. And that's been pretty consistent actually for quite a long time, at least compared to the standard American diet. And the reason is because that eating that way is linked to improvements or improved rates of heart disease, lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of cancer, lower rates of diabetes, weight problems, metabolic problems, and risk factors for those things. And more recently, the research has shown that people can actually not only prevent those things, but actually reverse and successfully treat those things just using food as a prime treatment. So it's a very impressive broad range of benefits for preventing and treating chronic disease.
My big motto is plants are medicine. That's like my
Yeah,
favorite thing to say.
yeah,
Okay, well, one of the primary reasons why I started Walker's Way is because the public is constantly bombarded with conflicting information about which foods are good for us and which are bad for us. I
yeah.
think that people are overwhelmed, they're confused, they're stressed out, and then they just give up because they don't know what's good for them and what's not. Can you explain um, why nutritional information, particularly about these plant-based foods and a plant-based diet, is so confusing for people?
Sure, I always tell people, like, don't feel bad about being confused because you could have five different PhDs in different subjects and go stand in the bookstore at Barnes& and Noble and look at the bookshelf and be just totally flabbergasted. Everybody's saying something different. They all claim science is on their side, et cetera, et cetera. And in the public realm, public media, nutrition is a total disaster. It's just a total confusing mess. And one of the big reasons is that people love to hear good things about their bad habits, as Dr. John McDougall says. One of his lines, people love to hear good things about their bad habits, and that sells. And so you're going to get books telling you, there's books out there saying don't exercise because it's going to make you fat. There's books out there saying eat bacon and meat all day. Of course, many people have tried that sort of diet plan, that low carb diet, and it's very appealing at first, and it can be commercially very successful. So realize that what bubbles to the surface in the public media is merely what is going to collect eyeballs and sell. And that is the prime driver for what people see. And so it's not really necessarily based on good evidence or good science.
Money is everything, right?
Right.
All
Yeah.
right, so how do we determine a good, reliable source of information from a bad one? Meaning, like, how do we know if one's funded by the meat and dairy industry versus something we can trust?
It's really hard, to be honest. It's really hard. I mean, people have become very savvy about um, making it look like, sorry. Um, People have become very savvy about um, making their presentation look very scientific, very credible, sounding very authoritative, and even if they have no traditional credentials or authority on the matter at all, they become very savvy at presenting themselves as authorities. And it's very difficult. You have to almost be familiar with the scientific literature, which of course, who has time to do that or background or training to really do that? Um, so you have to kind of listen to people with credentials, although that's hardly a reliable thing. You have to just begin to look at what's peer-reviewed published science. Ask when you're reading an article or reading a book, is there peer-reviewed published science? And if you have an opportunity to look a little deeper into that science, that's really when you're going to figure out whether this is good stuff or bad stuff.
Right. So no Yahoo articles
Yeah, yeah,
or
there's,
things posted on Facebook. So
yeah,
actually, so I take
yeah,
that back because I follow a lot of your sites and others that they actually do post reliable things on Facebook.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
In my experience, when many people are somewhat familiar with the effects of animal foods, it's more so related to heart disease, but they have less of an understanding of the cancer connection. And I actually always tell people about the cancer connection, probably because I read the China study and other sources. But so how could you sum up the effect of animal foods on the potential for getting cancer?
Well, interestingly, just to give you a slightly long answer, but the observational research for the past 50, 60 years has shown that people who have populations that have a more Western style diet, including more animal foods, more meat, more dairy, have higher rates of a variety of cancers, including breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer. The major cancers we worry about have been strongly linked to dietary practice, over the past 50, 60 years. And then you have to, okay, that's just an observation, fine, you can't tell anything for sure. So you have to look at other types of mechanisms, like how nutrition affects various risk factors for cancer. We see that studies showing, for example, that you can eat a whole food plant-based diet with modest exercise, and in 14 days you can reduce your estrogen levels by about a third. You can reduce growth factor levels by over a fifth. You can reduce testosterone levels significantly. You can lose weight. You can change your insulin sensitivity, your levels of inflammation. All good peer-reviewed science. And all of those things that I just mentioned, all of those things are risk factors for various cancers, namely breast cancer. And is one of the things that we're proposing to do research here at the University of Rochester is plant-based nutrition and breast cancer. So you can look, now we have good evidence that nutrition can change the risk factors, someone's risk factors for all these things in a very short period of time. And we have animal research showing that just by changing nutrition, changing what the animals eat in various studies, rodent studies mostly, you can actually dramatically change cancer promotion. You can turn cancer on and turn it off simply by changing the nutrition that these rodents are eating. So you put it all together, and it seems that nutrition is very likely to have a very powerful effect on cancer. But we have to be a little bit more cautious. The reason people are so enthusiastic about heart disease is because in cancer, the research hasn't really been done. The only thing out there that's really sort of a randomized controlled trial is with a whole food plant-based diet and prostate cancer, early stage prostate cancer, which showed pretty dramatic benefit for men with prostate cancer. But for other types of cancer, we need more research to know. If I have a woman in my office sitting in front of me who just got diagnosed with breast cancer, I don't know exactly what effect nutrition will have, what percentage benefit she may have if she changes her diet, and I certainly don't know, for example, if it's estrogen receptor positive breast cancer or triple negative breast cancer. Is there a difference in terms of how nutrition might affect her outcome? So we need a lot more research, and that's, I think, why people are more cautious with cancer. But certainly there's an abundant, way more research than people are aware of, that what we eat, and particularly eating a plant-based diet, is likely to provide major benefit for preventing and potentially even improving outcomes in diagnosed cancer.
My father actually had prostate cancer, and he went plant-based, and now he is free and clear of prostate cancer. So
Yeah, that's
I'm
amazing.
I'm
I've heard many anecdotes like that.
yeah,
It's too much to sort of imagine that there's no effect.
right. Which actually leads me to the next thing, protein. We live in a very protein-focused society. We're constantly told we need more and more protein. We need animal protein. We need the complete protein, and we're told that animal proteins are the only source of a complete protein. I've read that we can get essential proteins through a plant-based diet. So can you help clear that up for people that think you need animals to get a complete protein?
Yeah, and oftentimes people just even confuse the words. They say, have a protein with that, and what they mean is you choose a meat to put with it, right?
Right.
And if you look at the protein requirements, basically, to make a long story short, you can get all the protein you need without question. There's no ambiguity. There's no uncertainty about this. There's no wishy-washy. It's really clear-cut and straightforward. You get all the protein you need and meet the dietary requirements for protein by all the standard guidelines, eating a varied whole food plant-based diet. And you mentioned the essential amino acids, and people kind of get caught up on that. And the story with that is that some plants, if you look at their protein profile, first of all, plants have all the essential amino acids. So corn, for example, has all the essential amino acids, has every single one. But the thing is, if you were to get 100% of your calories from corn, like just go on a corn binge for a year, there's one amino acid where you would get it, but you wouldn't get enough of it. So it's sort of a deficient amino acid. And this whole mythology sort of came about that therefore, plants are no good, or you have to combine plants and to make the perfect meal, and it's like a math problem every day or something. And, it's kind of just goofy, to be honest, because your body is way more smart than that. You can just eat a variety of different plants, as long as it's not corn, 100% of the time for the rest of your life or something,
Who wants to do that
silly like
anyways?
that. I know. You just eat a variety of plants, and your body has all the essential amino acids from the variety of different plants because they all have different, strengths and weaknesses. You blend them all together. It's beautiful. It all works. You get enough. There's no. I always ask people, who's the last person you've met who had protein deficiency? In this,
That's
have
nice.
you ever met anybody who had a protein deficiency? And if essentially no one can say yes unless there's some cases, for example, in people in the intensive care unit who essentially are starving and not consuming any calories because they're near,
Right.
and but otherwise, or severe eating disorders, for
Right.
example. But
I'm
there's
glad you
just
talked. I'm glad
no
you talked about the variety because my other motto is eat the rainbow. Like when I
yeah
serve my son Walker, he has 10 different colors in front of him.
right
So variety is key.
yeah exactly.
Um, so for parents looking to do plant-based with their children, and I know you do with your toddler and probably your other son, A, what do they tell their pediatrician? Because a lot of pediatricians don't support it. And B, what do they tell people that give them criticism for it? Because in our society, we are criticized for plant-based. I assure you, I've had my plenty of criticism.
Yeah, I'm in a I guess somewhat protected situation being a doctor. People are a little less likely to sort of go after me. But no, I mean, and you see the news stories of people who are just doing truly bizarre things. Like, they decide their kid is sensitive to every food but walnuts. And, the kid is like suddenly 10 months old and they're 10 pounds, and in the ICU. And the headline is vegan baby nearly dies
Right.
or dies. It's and so there's this idea that you can't raise kids this way, and it's unfortunate because with a well-planned vegan diet or whole food plant-based diet, even better than a vegan diet, with a well-planned whole food plant-based diet, you get all the nutrients that you need except for B12. Kids and moms should supplement with B12. But you get abundant protein, you get more nutrients. I mean, kids eating this way are going to get more fiber, a lot more antioxidants,
Better than Lucky Charms, right? Lucky Charms
many
Pop
more
Tarts.
nutrients. Many more nutrients, and it has a stigma just because it's different. But the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, formerly the ADA, the major national body of dietitians in this country, the organization, recently came out with a paper at the end of last year saying that basically a well-planned vegetarian and vegan diet is appropriate for all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, and childhood. And I would just mention and throw in that everybody should be taking, if they're avoiding all animal food, should take a B12 supplement. That's important. It should be a varied whole food diet, and certainly for infants, breast milk is best. So, if at all humanly possible, That's not a time for plant food. At the first early infancy, of course, that's really a time for breast milk.
I'm actually glad you differentiate between vegan and whole foods plant-based because I've gone away from calling myself vegan to whole foods plant-based because vegan can mean Oreos, which are vegan, and licorice all day, in which case you're not going to be healthy. So,
There's a study done not long ago that published the nutrient intakes of vegans, vegetarians, and health conscious, quote, health conscious omnivores. And they found that each group was consuming the same amount of fat and the same amount of sugar
right.
throughout the day. So really, in terms of processed foods, vegans kind of take the cake.
Oh, all those fake meats. Yeah, see, we
You
steer
know, all
clear
the
of all
fake
that.
foods, all
Right,
the fake cheeses, the fake meats,
right.
the processed
They're
junk,
they're no
and
good. Soy
that's
protein
just
isolate.
yeah, it's really horrible. It's really
That's
horrible.
why I really do. I talk about that a lot with Walker's Way. Plant-based whole foods, eat the rainbow, because I do not support the idea of the processed meats and the fake things, because it's
Right.
just a bunch of ingredients that our bodies don't know. So I'm glad you differentiated between the two, because I think some people get those terms confused. A soy, that's a huge thing. What is your opinion on soy? I mean, I personally think, from what I've read, I thought soy is good for you if it's organic, non-GMO, not the soy protein isolate, the processed soy that's in so many products. So what are your opinions on soy?
Yeah, unprocessed soy is healthy. Non-GMO, organic, unprocessed soy, I totally agree, is healthy. And to give a super brief additional information, I mean, some of the soy story, there's two things that people are concerned about. One is the effect on hormone systems. And there's this whole idea that soy has phytoestrogens, which affect our hormone systems. And there is this whole concern around breast cancer and the effect on breast cancer and preventing it, promoting it maybe, and so people avoid soy. But it turns out from research that women who consume more soy actually have lower risks of breast cancer, and if they have breast cancer, they have lower rate of recurrence or death from breast cancer. So consuming more soy seems to be consistently associated with better outcomes. And the second issue, and also there's no good evidence that it feminizes women. It's not going to turn your
Right.
boy into, a little girl. It's not,
Because
it's
estrogen is
this,
different than phytoestrogen. I think people think
right,
phytoestrogen is estrogen, and that's the
right.
difference.
Phytoestrogens is very different. Phytoestrogens are, in some cases, they work as anti-estrogens. They actually go to the receptor, the estrogen receptor. They sit in there and they block the receptor from working. So they sort of block the estrogen activity. So it gets quite complicated. But the other thing people are worried about is like food sensitivities, which is different from the hormone issue. And soy is, of all the plants, soy is perhaps one of the more common foods that people can have sensitivities to, but it's not that common, and it's sort of something that if you have a sensitivity and you're able to discover it, yeah, avoid it. But it's really not something that most people should even really worry about or think about.
Right.
And so I think the whole soy story, there's a lot of confusion, but the science, in my opinion, is fairly clear that unprocessed organic soy is healthy. The soy protein isolates, the soy oil,
Yeah, stay away.
the soy protein powders and stuff, like you don't need any
No,
of that junk.
no.
Just stick to the whole food as much as possible.
Right. And ironically, the people that are scared of soy typically think are drinking the dairy, which is full of estrogen because
Right.
the cow was pregnant, and those hormones were
Well,
just
even more so than the estrogen in the dairy, what happens is when you consume the nutrients, that animal protein, that nutrient profile of dairy actually makes your body produce more growth factor, and it produces more hormone and more growth factors. So it's not only what's contained in the dairy, more importantly, it's what it makes your body do.
right.
And it sort of pushes all the buttons in your body to start increasing hormones, which is, a disaster for a
Right.
variety of things.
Now, I mean, thoughts on dairy, obviously, I can predict what you'll say, but like I feed my son the hemp milk and the flax milk and Ripple, which is the pea protein milk.
Mhm.
And what do moms say when they don't want to give their child dairy? We get a lot of dirty looks because milk does a body good, right?
Yeah, there's this is maybe a longer answer, but there's actually some pretty interesting research out there showing that kids consuming higher protein diets have more problems with body weight. They have a higher risk of being overweight and obese, which of course no one no one cares about that. No one gives people dirty looks for feeding their kid abundant animal protein, but which is associated with all sorts of problems. But unfortunately, you do get sort of dirty looks if you're avoiding milk. And with you asked a question about the pediatrician before, and I think that the you have to respect. You have to find a doctor. You don't need a doctor who is an expert in nutrition. You just don't. You don't need that, and you're not going to find it most of the time. And if they are interested in nutrition, half the time it's going to be something non-plant based, sort of an odd nutrition. I don't know. What you need is a physician who is open-minded and respects you and respects what you're doing, and and you can have an open dialogue. And if they have concerns, that's fine. I mean, they're entitled to be concerned, but you can say you can sort of talk about the process, what process you're doing, and explain yourself a little bit. And you can, because people see the headlines about vegan kids, and it's always this horrific sort of, I can't imagine the situation. It must be bordering on sort of mental illness kind of family, parents where they're feeding their kid like only walnuts and nothing else, or it's goofy. And so people see those headlines, they get a little worried, and you might take a little time. If you have a good relationship and someone who's respectful, they're going to give you a little time to sort of explain, this is what we're doing. We're adhering to sort of a varied diet, focusing on getting, you can always say you're getting more, really focusing on getting more vegetables, getting more fiber, getting more antioxidants, and trying to get our kid to enjoy those tastes and flavors. And so this idea of getting more is always, people sort of, that's very soothing to people, like,
Right.
we're giving our kid more of this. And you can even share some papers. You can go get that paper from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics that says, a well-planned vegan diet is appropriate for all stages of the life cycle. And you should be supplementing with B12. And then you can say, what do you think? Is there something maybe that you'd like to test? Would you like to do an extra hematocrit test to look for anemia? Would you like to test for B12? I mean, that's fine. We can test it. No big deal. And have sort of a mutual conversation. And I think if you have a reasonable pediatrician who is respectful, that kind of conversation will go a long way towards sort of alleviating their fears. And when it comes down to it, as a doctor, and I'm a family physician, so I'm trained in pediatrics and I've seen kids. When it comes down to it, one of the things, that ultimately, regardless of what the parent is doing or saying, it comes down to the objective measures when that kid's in the room. Is the kid developing normally? Are they growing somewhere on the normal scale, relative to what you might expect? And, if those things are happening, a pediatrician should be, relatively open to having that kind of conversation.
I actually started Walker's Way because at his 1-year-old checkup, he came back in the room and said very slowly, just because I think there was almost some shock. He said, Walker's blood work is the best I've ever seen. I'm like, really? I'm like, well, what's perfect? And he's like, Walker's is perfect. And I guess the iron was like unbelievable. So that's why I started Walker's Way. I just wanted to help parents with this plant-based to kind of abolish the myth that plant-based is unhealthy for our kids or
Right.
even ourselves. I know your time is valuable, so I have just one more quote. I just wanted to ask you if there's anything we missed, one message you want to give to parents or even non-parents. What would you want
Well,
them to know?
I think that it's so important what we feed our kids. I think it's maybe one of the most important things we do for our children, and it's the most important time of their life is when they're very, very young, weaning from breast milk, starting to introduce solid foods, and in that first year or two after that, because there's good science, and actually, to be honest, probably starting before that, during pregnancy, there's evidence that what a mom eats during pregnancy affects the child's taste preferences after they come out. So, we set the stage for our kids for their lifelong habits and tastes and preferences. And, this is not like a preference for which TV show they like or something meaningless. This has to do with what they consume, what they eat, which has a dramatic impact on their lifetime of health, vitality, vigor, and function. And we all want our kids to be happy and healthy. There's nothing more precious than our kids' health and happiness, I think, as parents, as caring parents. And so to pay attention to food is absolutely just a wonderful thing that you're doing and that your followers are doing. And be mindful of making it well planned. Having a varied whole food plant based
Right.
diet, taking a B12 supplement, getting some B12, that type of thing. But it's really, I just an over just a, I guess a comment of encouragement. It's really important stuff, and I think it's a good thing to do.
Right. I mean, my son, I think he's had one cold in his entire life,
Yeah,
and he's vibrant and he has more energy than anything I've ever seen. So he is
yeah,
doing well, and I'm a big believer in plant-based. So
yeah,
I want to
yeah.
help. I want to help parents with that. Um, Thank you so much. You
Sure.
and your father, everything you guys have done have completely changed my life, and I'm now trying to help others. So
Great.
Walker's Way is very thankful for you taking the time out of your Friday
Sure.
to help shed some light on the questions that we have.
Yeah. Great.
All right.
No problem. Thank you.
And oh, by the way, congratulations on your new son. Just had a
Yeah.
baby boy,
Thanks.
right?
Yeah. Baby boy, 3 months old.
Well, I will
So.
continue to promote the China Study and Forks Over Knives and other works of yours. And thank you again.
All right. Great. Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.